And good morning, everyone. Happy Wednesday morning to you. Welcome back to Morning Musings. I do appreciate you being with me. My name is Don K. Preston. I'm the president of Preterist Research Institute of Ardmore, Oklahoma. Now, a reminder, okay? Tomorrow, Thursday, I will be reposting video number 3 that Mike Sullivan and I did in responding to Doug Wilson's recent videos in which he condemns covenant eschatology, i.e., full preterism. Mike and I are just having a lot of fun in these videos. I can tell you that. In this video, number 3, now it's already been posted earlier in the week, okay? I understand that. But as I told you early on, I'm using those videos to plug into my Thursday morning musing slot, okay? So, if you've already watched that video, go back and watch it again. Watch it tomorrow, all right? In this video, we discuss Romans chapter 8, 18 and following, and how Doug Wilson uses that passage to preach and to teach a yet future coming of the Lord. The redemption of creation. Now, Mike and I cover a lot of testimony and evidence and realities in this video, so you do not want to fail to watch it. And again, even if you've watched it once, be sure to watch it again. That's tomorrow on my regular morning musings 1-hour show, video number 3 by Mike Sullivan and Don K. Preston, responding to Doug Wilson. Okay, back to Isaiah chapter 65. I've been going over this, and I understand that I've spent a good bit of time on this, but this is so critically important, ladies and gentlemen. Does Isaiah 65 predict the coming of the Lord to bring in the new creation of Matthew chapter 25, 31 and following? Well, as I've already shared with you, the commentators who comment on this kind of intertextuality understand and realize, yes, they're the same prophecy. Is different verbiage used? Yes. Does that prove that they are distinct and different? You know, I started to say I get a blast. It's not funny at all. I read a lot of critical, skeptical literature. And they say, well, they say things like this. 2 Peter absolutely could not be written by the Apostle Peter who wrote 1 Peter. Well, why? Tell us why it couldn't have been written by the same person. Oh, well, because 2 Peter uses different words. It has a different vocabulary. Seriously? You're going to tell me that point number 1, an inspired author. Point number 2, you're going to tell me that Peter was so illiterate, so limited in his vocabulary, that he couldn't use some different words, terms, and phrases in 2 Peter chapter 3 from what he did in 1 Peter? He had to use the exact same precise vocabulary? Where did that hermeneutical principle come up? Where is that established? And so, once again, I understand that Isaiah 65 uses some different terminology from Matthew chapter 25, but that proves nothing. They're both the coming of the Lord. They're both the time of judgment. They're both to bring in the new creation. Virtually everyone admits that. So, to continue. So the argument has been made to try to counter the point that if Matthew chapter 25, 31 and following is in fact drawing from and is the same subject matter as Isaiah 65, and if it is true that Isaiah 65 foretold the time of this judgment and the time of this new creation, as coming at the time of the judgment of Old Covenant Israel in AD 70, then that means that Matthew chapter 25, 31 and following was fulfilled in AD 70. It's not about the end of time, and that proves that the Olivet Discourse cannot be divided. By the way, that linkage, if it is true that Isaiah 65 predicted the coming of the Lord for the new creation, and if Matthew 25, 31 and following is the coming of the Lord to bring in the new creation, as Doug Wilson believes, then if it is true, once again, that Isaiah 65, upon which Matthew 25 is drawing, and with which it is parallel, and with which it would be fulfilled at the same time, then if it is true that Isaiah 65 would be fulfilled in AD 70, then Doug Wilson's attempt to divide the Olivet Discourse, not at Matthew 24, 36, but at Matthew 25, 31 and following, completely negated. It's gone. So some scoffers who appear every single day on my YouTube videos have denied that Isaiah 65 was predicting the destruction of Israel in AD 70. They have gone so far as to say, well, here in Isaiah 65:11, you are those who forsake the Lord, who forget my holy mountain, who prepare a table for Gad, and who furnish a drink offering for Manasseh. Well, that's the idolaters. Well, then they shifted gears, and they finally admitted, well, it was Israel participating in idolatry. So they've argued two different things. Number one, it's actually idolaters that the Lord is addressing here, not Israel, because whoever it is feeding, as it were, these idols, Benai and Gad, whoever it was feeding them would be destroyed. That can't be Israel. Therefore, Preston is misapplying Isaiah 65. Well, sorry, that won't work. And secondly, they say, well, look, Benai and Gad were actual idolaters. There were no actual idolaters in Israel in AD 70. Well, that's technically true when you want to literalize that. It also overlooks the fact of the rest of the context of Isaiah 65, but it overlooks the fact that Jesus and the New Testament writers accused Israel, number one, of becoming equal to the pagans. Number two, they accused them of being basically idolaters. They had turned the temple into their idol. They had turned the altar of the temple into their idol. Matthew 23 is really quite a powerful testimony to that. So the real question is, who was Isaiah addressing in Isaiah 65:11 and following? Was he addressing the pagans, promising their destruction? Or was he addressing Israel, who was guilty of that idolatry and promising Israel's ultimate destruction? And if you want to say that's typological destruction or antitype destruction, you go right ahead and do it, because as I've already demonstrated, you can't have multiple antitypical fulfillments. That's simply untenable. It is indefensible. So, notice, the Lord says in the previous verses, I'm going to bring forth descendants from Jacob, from Judah, and Arab my mountains. Who's he talking about? Well, he says, my elect. Who is this? It's the righteous remnant. And the Lord says, I'm going to save the remnant. And boy, this cannot be overlooked, cannot be minimized. One of Paul's fundamental doctrines, as I pointed out last week, is the salvation of the remnant. He understood He quoted from Isaiah 10:22, though the children of Israel be as the sand of the seashore, yet only a remnant shall be saved. He quoted that in Romans chapter 9. And thus, when we come to Romans chapter 11, 25 to 27, it says, and thus all Israel shall be saved. You can't have Paul contradicting himself and saying, well, it was once just the remnant, now it's all of them. No, his constant theme, starting actually all the way back in chapter 5, but nonetheless, in chapters 9 through 11, the constant theme is a remnant, only a remnant, just a remnant, not all, a remnant. Paul said, I'm a member of that remnant, by the way, Romans 11, 1 through 7. So when Paul says, all Israel shall be saved, he means all the remnant. What would happen to the rest of them? Isaiah chapter 65 answers it. You who? The corporate body. You are those who forsake the Lord, who forget my holy mountain. Now, folks, it wasn't the pagans who were forgetting the holy mountain, Zion. Yet it is that Yahweh is addressing when he says, you are the ones who forget me. And that word, when he says, you forget, that is absolutely interrelated to the doctrine of covenantal remembrance. In other words, they ought to have been observing the laws of the covenant by properly worshiping Yahweh on Zion. But they weren't. They were forgetting the mountain, which means they were violating the covenant. Folks, that's not the pagans. You are those who forsake the Lord, who forget my holy mountain. Well, was it the pagans that were forgetting the Lord? Was it the pagans who forsook the Lord? No. This is covenantal language. So he says, you are those who forsake the Lord, who forget my holy mountain, who prepare a table for Gad, and who furnish a drink offering for Mani. So it was the corporate body of Israel that forsake the Lord, was forgetting Zion, and who were furnishing a drink offering for Mani and Gad. It was Israel guilty of this sin. And as a result of it being Israel guilty of that sin, the Lord says, therefore what? You know, anytime you see the word therefore, look to see what it's there for. Since you're the ones that forsake the Lord, since you are the ones who forget my holy mountain, since you are the one who prepare a table for Mani and Gad, therefore, because you engage in these sins, therefore I will number you for the sword. You shall all bow down to the slaughter, because when I called, you did not answer. When I spoke, you did not hear. Wait a minute. Paul quoted this verbatim, Romans 10:22. So Paul applied the language of when I called, you did not answer, specifically and emphatically to Israel of his generation. Now, let me ask you a question, folks. For all of those who say, oh, God never promised to destroy Israel. Well, first of all, yes, he did. And right here's the proof of it. He promised to destroy the corporate body and to save whom? The righteous remnant. That's the focus. That's the issue. So when he says you will all bow down to the slaughter, that you is not the righteous remnant. It's you who are not the righteous remnant. It's you who forsake me. It's you who forget Zion. I'm sorry, ladies and gentlemen, to those who want to deny that Isaiah 65 is about the first century and the destruction of Jerusalem that's coming. And we got more on this that we'll cover next week. But for those who are denying it, you got to completely deny what the text says about who it was that forsook the Lord, who it was that was forgetting Mount Zion, who it was in forsaking the Lord, in abandoning the covenant and engaging in this idolatry. Who was it that was feeding, as it were, these idols? And as a result of that sin, the Lord says, therefore, you'll all bow down to the slaughter. It's simply a perversion of the text, ladies and gentlemen. And I really hate to use that word. I'm sorry. But when you deny the words of the text and you change it to mean, well, he's talking about the pagans and he's not talking about Israel, I'm sorry. That's a perversion. I'm not calling that dishonesty. I'm saying it's simply a perversion. It may come from prejudice. It may come from tradition. It may come from reading certain commentaries. But it's still wrong, and it's still a perversion. Hey, I am out of time. Don't forget, take advantage of my fantastic 3-book special. Go to my website, donkpreston.com, BibleProphecy.com. Order the special. Save yourself $15. Enjoy the material. All right. I will see you again as we continue our review and response and refutation of Steve Gregg's book, Why Not Full Preterism. I'll see you there.